Yo, what's good, everybody? And I know y'all heard the news within the past day or so. Terence Crawford, he's signing to fight David Avenesyan. You know what I mean? And it's not the Errol Spence fight. And I was kind of surprised that Crawford is the one announcing the fight first because he's facing all the criticism right now. Everybody is calling him a duck right now. You know what I mean? Because the last thing we heard about the negotiations was that Crawford, he agreed to everything. You know what I'm saying? But it was a transparency issue. Something about Bud seeing proof of his payment or something like that. I'm not sure what transparency means, but that was holding up the fight. And in the meantime, now that he got this fight with David Avenesyan, a lot of people don't know David Avenesyan. You know, he's not that great, but he's top 10 in all of the sanctioning bodies. David Avenesyan, I think his biggest win was against Josh Kelly. He was an up and coming prospect. He wasn't like a top dog or nothing, but he was a really skilled fighter. You know what I mean? He was like 10, 11, and 0. And David Avenesyan, he knocked him out in like 9 rounds. He'd come from behind knockout. That was like his best win, but he's not on the level, this championship level, and this welterweight. Welterweight is too deep. So this is a tune-up for Terence Crawford. You know, and I don't really blame Crawford for taking this fight because, like I've been saying on my channel, Spence and Crawford, if that fight was to happen, it wouldn't happen till next year. And if it did happen next year, like February or something like that, Bud would have like 16 months worth of ring rust, you know? And that was kind of why I was leaning Earl, one of the reasons in that fight, because, you know, Bud being the older guy with the layoff, and then plus is some technical things in the ring that I think Spence can come out with a victory. You know what I mean? And the fight is already like super close on paper for me. So like a 16-month layoff for Crawford, that's just not doing nothing but hurting him. You know, so Crawford, he got this deal to fight David Avenesyan, and he is getting his highest payday by far. You know what I mean? I think his highest payday was like 6, 7 mil. He's getting 10 plus fighting David Avenesyan, and it's going to be on BLK Prime. It's an app. It's a real low-key app. They don't really have many fights on there. I think they're trying to build it up. And Blue Blood Sports TV, you know, was behind, not solely him, but he works with those people that put this fight on, you know, because the fight, Bud himself didn't want to have that long of a layoff before fighting Errol Spence. And, you know, he worked with these guys over here, and now they inked the deal with him, you know, so he can get a fight in before next year. And that's realistic because this fight, you know, I think David Avenesyan, I mean, he'll give Bud some good rounds. You know, Bud is known to be a slow starter, but I think soon as when Bud gets going, I think he'll be able to get David Avenesyan out of there probably in about 6 or 7, because David Avenesyan, he's a rough, rugged fighter, but he's going to be standing right there in front of Crawford. Many counter opportunities. He don't have the footwork of Crawford. It's a tune-up fight. And, you know, Errol Spence, he's kind of a come forward fighter too. You know what I'm saying? So it could be like a little bit of repetition, you know, going into that fight. You know what I mean? But it's not a duck. I don't think this is a duck on Crawford. I think this is really actually a smart decision. but it's up to PBC to want to negotiate with Bud after the fight. I know that they are kind of mad at Bud for walking away from the table. And this is a real concern. The only concern for me is that the fight probably might not happen at all, because I hold like weight to what the actual fighter says. In Errol Spence, he said out of his own mouth, if the fight ain't happening this year, it ain't happening at all, and it's not his fault and all that. So I do see PBC kind of like not wanting to negotiate with Crawford again. You know what I mean? But this is a good idea for Crawford to get this big bag while he's waiting on that fight. And he gonna be fresh going into the Spence fight with like, because I don't think Bud will take a lot of damage against Avenesyan. Of course, he gonna get touched up a little bit, but he should be able to get him out of there without too much of an issue. For what I've seen Avenesyan like 3 fights. I don't think he got much for Bud. And I think that Bud I think that's not automatic. Nothing's ever automatic in boxing, but Bud going in there with Errol Spence on like a 16, 18-month layoff, he ain't going to be able to beat Spence, and he might actually get knocked out. So, yeah, though, Errol Spence, for the Spence fans, you know, I don't really like their logic. You know, as soon as the news came out, all of their videos, Crawford ducking. Even the more experienced guys who know the boxing game, all they just saying is Crawford ducking. He wasted Spence time. And, you know, I don't think he wasted Spence time at all. Spence fought like 6 months ago. You know, all them fighters on PBC, Spence will be able to get a fight in no time. He ain't waste none of Errol Spence time. Spence will probably be able to fight probably like around that same time. You know what I mean? But yeah, it sucks that it's not the next fight. It really sucks. And we have to bank on the fact that PBC will negotiate with Crawford after this tune-up fight. And I'm looking forward to see who Spence fights next. You know, WBA regular champion Amantis Stanionis, he might, you know, take that fight with Spence. I heard him and his team were a little iffy about fighting Spence, you know, earlier, but this could be a great time. You know, Stanionis, he had to get paid step aside to allow Spence and Ugas to fight. So he is the most likely next opponent for Spence. You know, and those two fighters, they're kind of similar. It's just Spence is just a higher level. Spence is like an A fighter. Stanionis, he's like a B minus, maybe C plus. I give Stanionis a B minus, but I think that fight will go all 12. Maybe not, but that's gonna be an entertaining fight. But these two guys, Spence and Crawford, they should win their next fights. They shouldn't have no problem winning their next fights. And we got to see if PBC will renegotiate with Crawford after, because those type of guys, you know, not those type, but Al Heyman, I heard that you know, he'd be willing to cut ties with people and never like try to give those guys a chance to really negotiate again. And Spence too, another worry before I end this video is Spence's weight. Spence might move up. This is why I think this fight may not happen, because Spence might move up. You know, he's a big dude, and it's getting harder and harder to make that weight. And he already said that he wanted Crawford next, and then he's going to 154. Like his next fight at 147 is gonna be meaningless. I wouldn't be surprised if Spence moved up right now. If Spence moved up, if Spence's next fight is at 154 pounds, we could just forget it. We can forget it. It's not gonna happen. Because if Bud move up to fight somebody, he gonna want to fight Charlo at 154. You know what I mean? So let's just keep following this situation. And Spence's next fight is gonna tell, his next opponent is gonna tell a lot. You know what I mean? Because if it's Stanionis, then okay, we gonna be like Spence. He gonna try to stay at 147 for the Bud fight. But if his next fight is at 154, we're screwed as boxing fans. That's all I'm saying.